Hello and welcome to the Sparks Heritage Museum's digital programming series. My name is Christine Johnson and I'm the Executive Director of the Sparks Heritage Museum. I welcome you today as we feature Mr. Dick Dreiling, who will be presenting a lecture entitled The Rich Railroad History of Reno and Sparks. A bit about Mr. Dreiling. He's a longtime resident of the Truckee Meadows and a 1956 graduate of Reno High School. He spent 30 years in a career in the U.S. Navy, and he is a stamp collector since 1948 and is today a member of the Nevada Stamp Study Society and has been since 1975 the only stamp club north of Las Vegas. He is also a longtime volunteer with the Sparks Heritage Museum, and he has been since 1999. He has served as a front desk greeter, a member of the Board of Trustees, a tour guide and a docent, a trained tour guide, and has spent several terms as president of our board and is presently serving as our board secretary. Mr. Dreiling provides tours of the historic train across the street, as I mentioned, on Saturdays from 1 to 4 p.m. And as always, please call or check our website for the most updated information on that. And you can find us at sparksmuseum.org. So with that, I welcome you again today and thank you for your interest and support of the Sparks Heritage Museum, and consider joining us as a member. All of our benefits are listed on our website, and stop by and visit us at 814 Victorian Avenue. And without further ado, please enjoy Mr. Dreiling's lecture.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. Today I want to talk about the rich railroad history of Reno and Sparks. It's going to be shown mostly on postcards. At the present time, both Reno and Sparks, apparently trying to be more cosmopolitan, try to ignore the railroad like it's something distasteful. Reno has even buried their tracks. In Swartz, they removed the train from their city logo, but neither of these towns would have existed without the Central Pacific Railroad. They came through here in 1868, did a weird buy-sell trade deal with Myron Lake, and put a depot and do a plat map. This is a copy of the original plat map of Reno. The original is in the Nevada Historical Society. This is merely a copy I have. It's interesting that you notice the railroad tracks here in the middle. This is all depot and cargo bins and warehouses. They named the streets. They had a lot of imagination. The street on the far east side, they called East Street. The one on the west side, they called West Street. The one in the middle, they called Center Street. The street that went to Virginia City got named Virginia Street. The street that went to Sierra Valley, they named Sierra Valley. They named this street after Myron Lake. They had one left over, so they called it Peavine. In later years, it was changed to Evans Avenue. Now, they decided that all the businesses were going to be along here, along the railroad, so they called that Commercial Row. They had a plaza on the other side. Those street names are still here, including 3rd Street sneaks in there at the end. This is a view of the Reno Yards, rail yards. And this is not a postcard, it's a photograph I got from the State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. What's interesting, you see this track right here, that helps date this photograph. This dates it because it's coming from Carson City. This is the V&T Railroad, and it was completed to Reno in 1872. Over here is the main line, which runs east-west. And here, interesting thing, this is where they wanted to put their maintenance yards. They couldn't because, as you see, it's a swamp. In the background, you can see Rattlesnake Hill. I suspect this photograph was taken from a slight rise that occurs just north of Crater Way And here you can see the old wood burner's engine. But this is where Swartz is today. Since they couldn't do it there, they put their maintenance yards in Wadsworth, which is about 30 miles down the canyon from Reno. And here we see the actual, this is for a very early map. This is the railroad line here. They wanted to come this way, but this is where the swamp is. So they had to go way around and down into the canyon. When they finally realigned the tracks, so they did go through this area, they fit on the swamp. This became Prater Way in Sparks. This beautiful building is the second depot hotel. It was built sometime after 1873, but it burned down in 1889. It was built to replace another one, just exactly like this, that burned down in 1873. They finally gave up on those. Here is the third depot, which is made of brick. Over here you can see Commercial Row, and there's the main line. Here is another view from looking across the tracks. This is Commercial Row along in here. This set of tracks right here that goes around behind the depot is the V&T tracks. It did not go much further along this way, but it did go to Virginia City if you went the other way. Here is a nice old woodburner locomotive on Commercial Row, getting ready to go to Virginia City. The Overland Hotel is right here. Over here, this is the Palace Hotel, which later became known on the lower deck as the Palace Club. So this is Center Street that we see right in between these two buildings. Now, before we go much further, I want to mention to you that this is a wood-burning locomotive. We can tell that by looking at the smokestack. When they have this big bulgy thing on top, this is actually full of screens and mesh to keep embers from coming out and setting fire to the world. When they change to wood and oil, or coal and oil, they use a straight stack. We have winters, not this year, but in the past, many winters. This is a snow plow they designed. It's not actually, it blows the snow out. Two of them were built in the Swartz maintenance yards. But coming across Donner Summit, a lot of places actually need these blowers. This is a view of Center Street in Reno. Right here is the Golden Hotel, which eventually burned down. But here you can see part of the sheds and everything blocking off Center Street. That's why you could not go north on it. This particular photo was taken sometime before 1904. We can tell that by the type of cars, but also the more important thing is there's no tracks in here. In 1904, they put in a streetcar line, and the end of the line was there at the depot there. Here is the view of the that third depot. And if you look down here very carefully, you can see cars with V&T loading up. Over here, we have the main line. Now, coming across Donner Summit in the early days, they had to have extra power because these locomotives were not powerful enough to get over that mountain. These are designated, most steam locomotives are designated by their wheel arrangements. These happen to be 460. It means they got 4 pilot wheels, no power, 6 powered wheels, and no additional wheels behind. Now here is one, and this is headed to the east. So they've taken one of the engines off already. And well, this is passenger train, you see that? So they can get by with one engine. Here they're getting ready to go west. And the same type of locomotive, but they're going to change later up the line. His dog makes sure everything works right. Some of these monster trains, when they really got big, look at the smoke and gas coming out of there. Coming across Donner's Summit, there's over 46 miles of snow sheds and tunnels. Coming through there, the crew were actually passing out by being gassed. So someone in the Southern Pacific said, why don't we turn the engine around? And he said, no, that won't work. And then he said, well, maybe it will. So they designed a locomotive that runs apparently backwards. The engineer sits on this side, the tender is back this way, and the engine actually runs in this direction. It's very efficient. The only way they could do these cab forwards is the fact that these engines burned oil. Almost all of Southern Pacific burned oil instead of coal. The reason for that was economic. The turn of the century, where was all the coal in this country? East Coast. Turn of the century, where's all the oil in this country? Southern California. So you burn the local fuel, made sense. Southern Pacific had railroad that ran on the east side. When they get over to the end of their tracks, they burned coal because that's what was available there. So they did have some coal burners, mostly oil. Now here is one coming in from the west. Locomotive, and you see all the big heavy cars back behind. But these are monsters. They're really beautiful. And what's interesting about them is when they first thought about doing that, some of the engineers said, oh my God, we'll get killed if we have an accident. In the entire run of these locomotives, they had a total of 1 death. And Southern Pacific bought they are the only railroad in the country that bought these. They liked them so much, they bought 257 of them and used them all over their line. They were really pleased with them. In 1910, there was a railroad that joined up. Around here, this is a narrow gauge. It means the wheels are only 3 feet apart. This is the Nevada, California, Oregon Railway. It ran from Reno via Altoona, California to Lakeview, Oregon. They originally planned to go all the way to the Dalles on the Columbia River, but they just never could afford to do that. The NCO was really kind of a rinky-dink railroad. The local newspapers called it the narrow, crooked, and ornery. Timetables were really loose. When they first started laying track in 1886 in Reno, they took off like a shot going laying track. Boy, they were having good. 40 miles later, they ran out of money, ran out of track. So they serviced Susanville for many years until finally someone went back east and got some more funding and they could put another 5 or 10 miles in. They finally made it to Lakeview, Oregon in 1912. Took them a long time to get there. And by 1915, Western Pacific had bought out all their tracks and made them standard gauge. So the last narrow gauge strip out of Reno was in 1916. Western Pacific took the same building and changed it, made it Western Pacific Depot. Now, in modern times, the building is still there on 4th Street, but it's not used by the railroad. A local company has either leased it or bought it. I don't know the details of the situation. And they put in a brewery. And then they worked around trying to find a decent name for it. And they came up with a really original name. It's called the Depot. And it apparently is very popular today. This is Southern Pacific Depot. And this is looking to the southwest. The building on this end was basically Wells Fargo cargo and so forth. You can see in the background the old Overland Hotel. This is a view from the other direction. And this building was there for a long time. Like most of it's still there. Here's an Overland Liberty near Reno. It says, well, they're coming through the the river, and this is before they had cab forwards, because you notice they got two engines attached on this one. When they put these monsters in, look at the smoke and gas coming out of that. You can understand why the crews didn't want to be back there. This weird little machine, it's a MCI Motor Car. It's used for light passenger traffic. They said it was a lot more efficient to be able to run these instead of a whole train. They built a total of 152 for use in railroads throughout the world. Southern Pacific had one that ran between Reno and Truckee. The V&T bought one and used it to, they made one trip from Carson City up to Virginia City and found that the engine was so weak they couldn't handle it. So they ran basically between Reno and Minden. The last operating MCI Motor Car is now at the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Carson City. It's been totally restored, and on special occasions they take it out for rides for people going around. It's really a spectacular looking machine. Here's a display in Reno that we suspect is around 1925. Here's an old wood burner engine, and here is a more modern before they went to the cab forwards. Now, this little engine, I have another postcard in my collection that shows that engine, or one just like it, and says the first engine over the Sierras. I seriously doubt that, because this engine is a 210. That doesn't have enough power to pull anything, especially across Donner Summit. About 1900, Southern Pacific decided they really did want the tracks to go through where they go today. So they filled in the swamp and moved their maintenance yards from Wadsworth to Reno, or to Swartz. This is the Swartz Roundhouse. When it's completed, it had 40 stalls on a semicircle. It was the largest roundhouse in the world at that time. It handled, the stalls were 90 feet deep. Later, as engines got larger, they had to take 10 stalls, extend them out to 105 feet. And many years later, they had to take 10 more and extend them out to 150 feet. There is a turntable in the center. You can see this engine sitting on there. And that's how they would go in and out for repairs. Here's a back view showing the oil tanks. This depot was built in Wadsworth when the maintenance yards were there. When they moved to Sparks, they actually tore that depot down, put it on a flatbed, hauled it down, and re-erected it. And it became the first depot in the area. That building still stands today, but now it has like a control tower on top, and this is the Western Pacific Depot, and it's still being used, even though most of their stuff was moved out of town. Here's another view of this is the maintenance shops here, and this is the water tank, and the roundhouse is back over in here. Here's the main entrance to the roundhouse. Now, normally, the open side is the main entrance, but due to prevailing winds around this area, they had to turn it around, and this is actually the main entrance. They put in a streetcar line that ran from Reno to Sparks, and then later all over the Reno area. And here is the motorman and the conductor in Sparks. And what's interesting, you notice the lady here with a cradle board. Cost 10 cents for a trip from Reno to Sparks. This map shows the line. It came across here and then down through, and eventually came along and ended up down by the roundhouse. Here's a stage photograph of the cab forwards in the Swartz Roundhouse. I've seen another photograph, not a postcard, and since this is mostly all postcards, I'll use this one, but it shows 15 of them in a row. It's pretty amazing. Here's an engine coming out of the roundhouse after completing repairs. Now here is part of the round, here's the end of the roundhouse. These are all maintenance sheds. This is the machine shop back here. Later on, they put another building behind it, it's a erector shop. And there they had a huge crane that could lift the locomotive off its wheels so they could change and repair the wheels. Here is the end of the line, the streetcar line, and there's workers going to work. Now, when they first built the trolley car, the streetcar line, they had some cars, and the question is, were they motorized cable cars or were they specially made? I vote for cable car. That sure looks like a cable car to me. Can't prove it, but that's my feeling. Here's some of the fancy snow sheds coming across the mountain, and with all the snows they have of them down there, it's really necessary. This is a 1-track, and here is a 2-track. And this helped keep the trains running even in bad weather. Now this photograph, this is a strange one. This is a whole bunch of people out there. They're welcoming 2 new switcher engines. These are strictly used in the yard to move equipment around. And they took 2 photographs of these 2 engines and all these people. The first photograph is the one we see here. The second photograph, everybody changed positions except that man right there. He is standing exactly the same place in the same pose as on the other. And as you see here, if anyone knows any of these guys, please let me know, because I'll make a copy of this photograph free of charge. Here's another photograph. This one, it says on the back, this information at the bottom is written on the back of it. It's taken at Swartz, November 8th, 1916. It's 8 a.m. by O. Sandern. The fireman, his name is Ford, engineer is Harriman. The switchman, W.D. Sweeney and W.T. McKinney. The foreman was Jason Quinn, and the general yard manager was G.A. Abbey. Again, if you know any of these folks, let me know. I'll give you a copy of this picture. I have no problem sharing. Now, I volunteer at the Swartz Museum. We're at the corner of Victorian and Pyramid. If you can't remember the address, 814 Victorian, look for Last Chance Joe. We recently got him there, and he's really beautiful. Museum volunteer Dick Dreiling puts on a conductor outfit, and every Saturday does family-friendly tour guides or tours through the train. They go inside, we look at it, it's pretty spectacular. And this is the engine. It's a 1907 wood or oil burning 460. It originally was the Nevada, California, Oregon. And when they got rid of the engines because the Western Civic made track, Southern Civic bought it, took it down to Mina, Nevada, and it ran over the pass down into Keeler, south end of the Owens Valley. He was retired in 1955, donated it to Carson City Museum. They didn't want it, but they stored it in another museum off the side, and finally moved it back in time for the state's centennial celebration. The caboose is a 1941 cupola caboose, and down at the end you see what looks like a passenger car. Well, it was built in 1911 as a passenger car, but remodeled in 1928 to a railroad executive business car. This car is spectacular. It has the equivalent of 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 3 of them with tubs and showers, a kitchen, and a pantry. And we go through and I talk about the job everyone has to do. So thank you for your viewing. I hope you enjoy yourself.